Trauma healing goes in stages.
Yes.
And so if you've never cocooned, you need to cocoon. If you've never had someone be like, holy shit, I'm so sorry. You've never gotten to feel like a victim, then you need to feel like a victim.
It's sometimes that part of us that's holding on to the past holds on because there's an attachment there, even if that attachment is to the person that perpetrated against you, because it's so tricky when it's your father.
What is a practice that can help your nervous system experience safety when that is a very foreign concept for you?
Our bodies have such incredible wisdom if we are willing to develop that connection. And I believe that in terms of the very practical tools of turning towards safety, one of those is...
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of this Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed.
I'm Layla Martin, and welcome to this Tantric Life. Today, I am joined by Dr. Arielle Schwartz, who has a PhD in clinical psychology. She's a certified complex trauma professional, works with EMDR. She's a consultant and Kripalu yoga teacher. She's an internationally sought out speaker, a leading voice in the field of trauma recovery, and the author of 7 books, including the Complex PTSD Workbook, which I bought years ago, EMDR Therapy and Somatic Psychology, the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook, and her latest Applied Polyvagal Theory in Yoga. This queen has been busy. As the founder of the Center for Resilience-Informed Therapy, she offers an integrative mind-body approach to therapy that includes relational therapy, somatic psychology, EMDR therapy, parts work therapy, and therapeutic yoga for trauma. She specializes in applied polyvagal theory, which focuses on addressing imbalances within the autonomic nervous system that underlie most mental and physical health conditions. She provides informational mental health and wellness updates through her writing, public speaking, social media presence, and blog. She believes that the journey of trauma recovery is an awakening of the spiritual heart. You can learn more at www.drarielleschwartz.com. I'm so excited for our conversation today, in which we are going to talk about our individual experiences of trauma, the therapies that have helped us the most, why the journey through the body is so essential, basic practices you can use to feel safer in your body and your life, ways that you can understand and heal sexual trauma, and also how this grand wisdom tradition of trauma healing can absolutely change the destiny of your life and the entire world. This is a really beautiful conversation. I'm excited to share it with you. Welcome. You said to just call you Arielle, but I like Dr. Arielle. It feels like it's kind of like, woo.
Thank you. Thank you. What a pleasure to be here with you. And you have such a joy about you, and it radiates.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, and you know, thank you for saying that. And what I love is that the joy has increased so much from doing trauma healing. Like the more trauma healing I did, the more truly joyful I became. And I used to think of myself as a pretty sad, heavy, disconnected person who lived in a lot of just like head and survival. And when I first started meditating, all I felt was like hell inside of my body. And so it's beautiful to be so recognized by my joy, and I want for my joy. And I want everyone to know that you can do work and actually uncover joy within you, because this was not how I felt when I was young. In fact, I used to get like shit when I was a little kid for being so serious and so heavy and crying so often. And so it's beautiful that, you know, so much of the work that you do actually lets people restore joy and magic to their lives.
Yeah. And your story is really important, because I think too often if we think that we have trauma, we think that that's end game, that there is no path forward from that. And so to be able to hear a really powerful woman speak about her own journey and the courage that it takes to move through that and into reclaiming who you are and your potential and who you're meant to be. And you know that so much of my work is about post-traumatic growth. And unfortunately, too often when we hear about trauma, we think that the only outcome potential is PTSD, is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And so we need to hear more growth stories.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the prayer really matters, because when I started on this journey, I was like, look, like, this might not work. Like, I might actually just be doomed. Like, this might have been too much. Like, it might be that I can never actually truly be happy, never feel good in my body. I don't know what the fuck safety is. When people talk about that, it's like a foreign concept to me. I mean, I was like blacking out during sex, waking up screaming like I couldn't have sex for 7 years without being drunk or high. I was like, I don't know, honestly, if there's a lot of hope for me. And I was like, but if I'm going to do all of this work, I don't just want a survival mentality. I don't want to just survive this. I want to actually end up better, more sexy, more alive, more healed, more joyful than I would have been because I did all this work. And what people often don't understand about trauma work is it's kind of the same as personal development, spirituality work anyways. You have to go to the core, the basement of your being, and discover the absolute truth of who and what you are, how resilient you are, what you're capable of, to touch like the core of aliveness within you and to heal in incredible ways. And so trauma to me is just this really deep reason to go there. And so it's like, we can make it a gift if we want to, even though, like, not gonna lie, like, the day-to-day of it can feel like absolute hell.
That's right. And I think the piece that you're naming around the choice to go in toward it, and that's such a juncture in itself, right? Like, we can spend so many years, as you say, trying to avoid this thing that feels like if I touch it again, it will kill me. The truth is that when we go toward it, we must recognize that which perhaps even almost killed you didn't.
Yeah.
Now, it's not the trauma that makes you stronger. It is your willingness to commit yourself to attending to its impact on you, and to recognizing that doesn't have to define you, and your willingness to feel what you've been avoiding.
Yeah.
That's what makes you stronger.
Yeah. So what put you on this path? Can you take me to a moment where you were like, wow, I'm going to eventually write all these books on trauma and become this like expert in this field?
Oh, goodness. Well, the moment doesn't start with this recognition that I'm going to write all these books. And, I've just in the process of writing my 8th book on trauma recovery right now. The moment starts actually with the trauma itself. And I'll share with you one of them. And there's many. When you have a history of complex trauma, it's not like there's one single event. There are a series, or sometimes many, many years of accumulated events, and they shape who we are. But I'll share one of them that I actually haven't shared before in a public forum. And I feel kind of called to share this one here because it feels worthy of our topic in particular. And this was a moment when I was 12. And I was in school, and this occurred in school in the classroom. And it was one of those you might recall in our old science classrooms where there's a double desk. So you share a desk with another person, and it's like a lab desk. And so the teacher had put on a movie to watch, and the person that I was sitting next to took my hand and put it on him, and then started to put his hands on me in the dark in the classroom. And I completely froze, completely froze. Right. And I'm going to pause there just to like let myself breathe around that, and anyone listening, because those moments are so confusing. They're so confusing because on the one hand, of course, your body responds, and I'm a 12-year-old, pubescent, emerging young woman. And so on the one hand, my body responds. On the other hand, wrong time, wrong place, wrong person.
Yeah.
Right. And so everything, if I were to really tune into the instinct, would have screamed, get your fucking hands off me and give me my hand back. Right?
Yeah.
And yet in the freeze and in the embarrassment and the discomfort of how this is happening in this very public space with my peers all around me, I didn't do any of that. There's another part of the story, which I'll hold for a moment and just going to let that be a little pregnant pause for a moment. Yeah. So, yeah. right? Just letting that one through. And the subsequent, what happens next is this continues throughout the year. Every time the lights go out, we watch a movie, we watch a movie or something is going on in that space. This continues.
Wow.
And what I did around it
Mm.
was I convinced myself that it was okay when it wasn't.
Right.
Anyone relate to that story? Right. And I convinced myself that it was okay and that we were dating. This was not a dating relationship. This was not a consensual experience. There was no, let's go watch a movie together in public and hold hands moment, right? There, in fact, was no public relationship. And in my mind, the story that I told myself was a way to try and remove the shame and the humiliation that I felt around that, and to try and make something that wasn't okay. Yeah. Yeah. When we broaden out the lens on these kinds of stories, and I know I'm not alone with this kind of story, and of course I've done so much of my own therapy around these events in my life, sometimes what happens is that moment didn't start from nowhere, right? Like the part of me that froze or didn't say, what the hell are you doing, was already a learned trait, even if it didn't happen in that same context. But the experience of feeling voiceless or powerless or freezing in a situation where I didn't have control, or feeling embarrassed about something and taking responsibility for something that wasn't mine, all of those seeds had already been planted. Yeah. And then here's this right moment within this sexual context where all of those sprouts from those seeds showed up, and they replayed themselves. And then they replayed themselves in other situations later in my life as well. It wasn't until the recovery side of this story, it wasn't until I started to enter into my own journey of healing and therapy and somatics, the body-centered work, which is now cornerstone of everything that I do, that I actually started to unwind the pattern. And that's where the books came from.
Yeah. How does it feel in your system right now to have revisited and shared a moment of trauma?
Profound.
Yeah.
Right? Profoundly empowering. Even if I haven't shared this story so much publicly, it is a story that I have reworked and rewritten and exposed myself to and reclaimed my voice around and reclaimed my no around in so many arenas since then. And I can hold that 12-year-old girl with the most love, with the most kindness. She didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, no, right? Right?
Totally.
Yeah. So we can get to that point around a really raw story, right? I mean, that the story in itself always will have a certain degree of tenderness to it and wrongness to it, because inherently it's both. But it doesn't mean that I am identified anymore with that girl that froze. In fact, what I can say is, of course you froze. Of course you lost your voice. Of course you in a sense, the urge to tell the story that we were in relationship is in itself a trauma response, right? And to engage in a pleasing behavior, even though it wasn't an honest truth or an authenticity of mine, is a trauma response. Yeah.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. So can you walk us through some of the practices that you used to turn a story like that, which it's like if you don't do the healing, right? You can continue to carry that freeze. You can replay those experiences in your life. You can carry so much shame or judgment around that part of you, right? You can close down to men, not be able to feel pleasure or joy or real connection, right? An experience like that could have such a lasting impact on your adult life. What did you do to now make this something where you can talk about how much you love that little girl and tell this and have it feel like a profoundly empowering moment rather than a moment where you're freezing again, which, right, so many of us who are revisiting our trauma, we can actually feel trauma in it if we haven't resolved it.
Yeah.
Like we can put ourselves back into the traumatized state.
Exactly. And I wouldn't have shared that story here if I hadn't worked it through, right? Like, I don't think it would have been appropriate. It would have been traumatizing for others to hear. And, so we do need to really know that trauma healing occurs in the right space, right time, right support, right?
Yeah.
Right container.
Yeah.
And so I had been introduced to somatics when I was about 21. So, let's go 10 years post this moment in earth science and
what are
seventh grade.
somatics?
Somatics are body-centered psychotherapies, and they are the ways in which we basically get to allow the body to take the lead in the healing. So many of our therapeutic modalities out there are about talking about what happened. Great. It's a great skill to be able to do.
Yeah.
It's just not the whole story.
Yeah.
Because the freeze response or the tension that we carry around those kinds of experiences, the shame, the embarrassment, the contractions, those are all held in here.
Yeah.
And so if we don't engage in some way or another our body to partner with us in the healing process, we are only getting half of the healing equation.
Yeah.
And I first got introduced to somatic psychology, to this body-centered experience when I was in college, and I had gone to a workshop around it, and it dramatically shifted something for me. One workshop, one weekend. Now, did that then open up the next 20 years of therapy? Yes. But right. But those deep workshops, those deep opportunities to immerse yourself in an experience are really catalysts.
Yeah.
And so I had that catalytic experience in a workshop, and at the age of 21, where we're basically kind of like rocking your body on the floor and doing partner exercises and really just kind of feeling my way in, as you say, to the basement, to the foundation. And I made my way from head down to, shoulders, neck, heart, belly, pelvis. And I was like, oh gosh, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And as much as it was unearthing something that was a little scary and uncomfortable, there were a lot of emotions. I had a lot of grief, but it also awakened a sense of an immediate tendril of what freedom could feel like from that, an immediate tendril of what compassion for myself could feel like. And that's huge, right? And so what it opened up for me was a hunger for more of that. I was like, okay, so if that's possible, how do I learn more of this, both for myself and my own healing journey, but also to help others to heal as well? And so that's what brought me out here to Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live now. And I began to just study this full time. And I was in a master's program studying body-centered psychotherapy and somatic psychology. And I was also in my own therapy. And I'll also name here that in addition to really being able to re-embody and embrace and feel into myself, there were a lot of moments where I would go in to sit with my therapist and all that I did was cry. I didn't even know why. I didn't even have words for it yet. I would just sit on the couch and weep, and I would feel so disoriented, and I would feel foggy and confused about why I felt the way that I did. And it took years for that slow unpacking. Even though there was the big experience in the workshop, it took years for me to really understand who I am, how I've become who I am, what happened to me that shaped who I am, and that I have the power to define who I am.
Yeah. And one of the kind of ideas that has really helped me get excited about that going into my self journey I don't remember who shared it with me. It wasn't my original idea, but it's kind of like these mythological adventures, right? Like you can think of like a Lord of the Rings, right? That we can think of that as an external adventure where you're going to go like find the ring and fight the golem and see the dragons. You can also understand that as an inner adventure. And that like the external adventure, like who would want to do the adventure where you're just like, what dragon? Like you just found the ring. It was just there. It's done now. It's like our inner journey actually invites us to know ourselves, to find our courage, to have these moments of triumph and absolute despair. And so I think we can come with this conditioned idea that like, oh, my inner reality should be all like butterflies and rainbows. And you're like, what the hell?
Exactly.
It's like, there's demons in there and like angry parts and like things I never imagined and like dragons and golems and like, yes, also like precious rings beyond anything you could ever imagine, like superpowers, gifts, like mystical abilities, like beauty beyond beauty. And I think one of the great cosmic jokes, if you want to think about it that way, is like ultimately you realize that like instead of original sin, it's original beauty, that you're more beautiful than you ever could have imagined in your truth and in your entirety. But the way that you make yourself, like the way that you get to that realization is through all these challenges and all these, it's almost like levels of knowing yourself, and each one presents this opportunity to discover what you're made of, who you are, how much you can love, like what's available to you in every moment. So you can think of it as this like heroine's inner journey where every part of yourself that you meet, you also get to like up level through your relationship to that part of yourself. So instead of being like, oh my God, right? Because I had the same experience. Like my first somatic therapist, she was like, what do you feel? And I was like, what do you mean feel? She's like, no, really, what do you feel in your body? And I was like, I don't feel my body. I don't feel anything below my neck, right? And also the same way that you described it, I was like inch by inch, I like almost descended into my body. And at the time it was like, why does this feel so bad? And like, why are there so many parts of me that are so unworthy or so despondent or so self-hating? But then eventually I was like, oh, if I actually think of this as an opportunity to discover where is the most beauty, where is the deepest relationship, how can I find more love for all these parts of myself, this actually becomes an inner adventure where I get to become so amazing. And then it's like, oh, the universe didn't just set me up to have a living hell inside of me. The universe set up this amazing inner obstacle course where I get to discover who I'm made of and develop myself as a soul, right? So we can actually see this journey that has all these gifts in it of like, okay, so I'm discovering these like hellish places within me. And wow, like every single one is like this amazing test by this like epic inner guru to actually like find more love, more compassion, more understanding, more presence.
It's so beautiful to hear you speak that. And in the post-traumatic growth guidebook, I actually take the reader through a hero heroine's journey arc as that practice. And ultimately, when you find, it's not the chalice or the ring or the princess that we ultimately find. What we're finding is our own inner wisdom. We're finding our own inner beauty, as you say, and that capacity not only for compassion but what also is such a powerful piece about that arc of the hero or heroine's journey is that when we descend, we have to bring with us all of the allies and our team. We don't descend in there alone. Like we descend with a therapist and we descend with a team of other people who are willing to stand by us as we go into that courageous process.
Yeah.
But the other piece is that we emerge with something, not only for ourselves, but something that this world so deeply needs from us.
Yeah.
And that is what we call the return. Those are the gifts that we bring back to the world that allows you to do what you do now, right? Allows me to do what I do now. And if we don't allow ourselves that re-emergence. So sometimes what happens is we just do the descension and then we get caught in the labyrinth and we never we never find our way out. And so we need to have those allies with us and those guides that actually help to point us out of the labyrinth so that we have that opportunity to emerge and to discover that all of that was not for naught, right? Like all of that is actually to help you discover your purpose, the meaning of your life, right? As Mary Oliver says, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And that's what we get to come out with.
Yeah, because I think that I've actually seen this in many people. And for a while, it became true of me that the identity of being traumatized can become comfortable, right? So there's a certain period, as you're talking about, where the healing is really necessary, right? I had this like hilarious trauma healing period where like my boyfriend at the time, I'm like in my 20s, he had gone to like an Ivy League school and he was like, I'm going to become a male stripper in New York City. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I'm going to give high-end hand jobs to like gay men, even though like I'm straight for like $700 an hour. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I was like, I'm so traumatized and I've never let myself rest. Like, I went to Stanford, I started studying Tantra. I did all these meditation retreats. I've worked my ass off. I've been a waitress, a cocktail waitress, like all of this. Like I've just worked so hard. I've done so much, right? I'm in my early 20s. I just need to rest. Like I never have let myself rest. And he was literally like, I mean, God bless, like this is so privileged and such a universal gift. He was like, I will come home from doing these hand jobs and doing this male stripping, and I will put cash under the mattress and you can buy food. We were like living like way down the like L train in Brooklyn, right? And he was like, and you can just like eat food and sleep, right? And so I just cried for a few months in the fetal position, right? And it's like, as I say this, I'm struck in my heart by a sense of sadness that I have often felt, which is that we don't live in a society where everyone who needs a few months to fucking cry can. Like that shouldn't be a privilege. And it was and is to have had that time for myself and to be able to rest like that. It was so special.
I have a name for it, I call it cocooning.
Cocooning. What a beautiful name. Right. I just like ate pasta. And like at the time I was like really into like politics. So I'd like do like 538. I think that's the website. Like check all the statistics and stuff like that and like watch Lost and then just like cry more and eat more pasta. And like once I like put on a coat and went out and like bought a pot for the kitchen. And I was like, I left the house. Right. And at a certain point, right, it became comfortable to be broken, to cry, to like, I wasn't actually fully broken, but that's what it felt like. And to let myself feel broken for a little while because a part of me was to go through all of that. And at a certain point I had to be like, oh, now this has actually become a defense mechanism against my greatest power. This is safe and known and comfortable. And I'm actually terrified of what my life could be like and feel like outside of my traumatized identity. And one of the big turning points was actually I had my partner give me a pussy massage. And I was like, I want to see the root of my trauma and why it's still there. And I actually saw like the huge ball of pain and it was me holding on to it with an iron fist. And I was like, fuck. I was like, my dad stopped abusing me in the 1980s. And like, it's actually not still happening anymore. And if I was maybe living in a reality where I didn't have time to heal, I didn't have access to tools, then like, of course, it's not me still holding on. But because I have access to all these tools, because I've done this work, because I've done this level of meditation, at a certain point, I was like, oh, I actually have to let go now. That's like, right. I have to release. I have to decide I want something else. And I realized it was the terror of the freedom and the bigness and the joy of being beyond my trauma that was keeping me at that point still holding on. And I think as I say this, I think something really important to articulate is that trauma healing goes in stages.
Yes.
And so if you've never cocooned, you need to cocoon. If you've never had someone be like, holy shit, I'm so sorry. You've never gotten to feel like a victim, then you need to feel like a victim, right? And at a certain point, then there's something beyond that as well.
I don't know if this relates for you, for your story, but I'm curious and I'll ask you this kind of as a question as well. But sometimes that part of us that's holding on to the past holds on because there's an attachment there, even if that attachment is to the person that perpetrated against you.
Yeah.
Because it's so tricky when it's your father, right?
Yeah.
And so, that part that's holding on is not holding on to the abuse, but it's holding on to maybe this time daddy will be different. Maybe this time daddy will love me.
Yeah.
Right. And so actually to let go of that is also recognizing that it wasn't and it didn't become different. I mean, I don't know what ended up happening with him for you, but that is a very tender story that you share, and to kind of get in touch with the part of you that's holding on. Our identities hold on for a reason.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that. I definitely recognize that one of the biggest places that I did that was in my romantic relationships with men, and specifically continuing to bring this open-hearted, like shattered wounding to them, and like desperately hoping that one of them could make it better. And I do realize that there was like this underlying hope that like some man could be good enough, love me enough, strong enough, worthy enough that like he could like somehow, some way make it all better. And I think the heartbreak that you're alluding to, that I finally had to face, that actually stopped me from replaying that cycle over and over again of like basically starting a fight, creating some drama, creating a huge rupture, and then being in my trauma state and being like, will you love me enough? Will you create enough safety? Will you save me somehow? Right. Was finally realizing like no man can heal this. And actually, to a certain degree, nothing's ever going to make it better in that way. Your dad's never coming back. It's never going to be 1986, 7, 8, 9, whatever year you want to go back to. And like, that was the dad you got. That was the childhood you got. And no one can heal that for you. The only real work now where I had to get to is like you and God loving your nervous system and yourself and your own life so much that you can heal your nervous system to a place where it actually doesn't matter what happened in your childhood anymore. Because if you think about it, and this is where I finally got to, if I love myself and I'm fully alive in my life and I am free to have the kind of relationships I want and the kind of sex I want, who cares what happened, right? Like then I'm free of all that childhood pain. But what that required was to say, no man's going to heal this for you. Actually, you're the only one who can heal this. You can have a supportive partner. You can have someone who loves and cares about you, but no one can do this for you. And playing out the trauma over and over again is like somehow this hope that you don't have to face the fact that like, actually you don't get another father and like you don't get another childhood. So the only thing you can do is heal your nervous system now.
That's right. That's right. And there's so much in what you're sharing, one piece being that the only time and space that we can heal in is now. And that part of what trauma healing lets us reclaim is now.
Yeah.
Because what happens with trauma is that we get stuck in the past, that in some way or another, we're still living in trauma time as if 1980 is still happening.
Totally.
And, so that is such a powerful reclaiming that actually allows you to then, once we are in now, then you have a whole array of choices that are available to you that perhaps weren't available to you back then, but now they are.
Do you know why we do that? Because I was like, why am I trying to replay this horrible thing? And I get it. Like we're trying to like heal childhood through now, but why do we do that?
Yeah. So the reenactment is a very central part of what we think of as symptoms of PTSD, in the sense that we will reenact, we will replay, we will find people that will become the other that we expect them to be. And we're going to do this little dance. And one of the reasons that we do that is that we are trying to find a completion. We're trying to find the end game of this story. Like, where does the story finally end? Where's the satisfying completion of this? And that we think that we need to go back into the reliving of it in order to find a new ending. But unfortunately, what happens instead is that we relive it and then we recapitulate the same old ending.
Yeah.
The other reason why we replay it is that if we look at this through, you've been speaking about a part of myself, been using this language, but we really do carry parts of ourselves that are still in trauma time. And so when I spoke about my 12-year-old self, for example, what I needed to do was not basically hand my younger self off to somebody else to take care of. That ultimately, as you're speaking to, like, it became your charge, your responsibility to take care of that young girl. It became my responsibility to take care of that young girl. When I hand her away, when I give her to somebody else to take care of, maybe they're a very trustworthy other, but even so, it's really not their job. Not once we're adults. It's the only time that we're really dependent on someone else is when we're a kid.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get those parents that do a great job at it, and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
And yet once we emerge into adulthood, we have to reconcile with this kind of painful yet empowering reality that we are the parents. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the one that has to take responsibility for ourselves now.
Yeah. Yeah. What is trauma time?
Okay. So when we get stuck in trauma time, it's as if the part of us that lived that in the past is here now in a way still stuck with the only options that were available back then, with viewing the world through a filter as if then is still now.
Yeah. I think one of the most humbling things about trauma time that I realized is that I didn't know what safety was, right? Like, even as a teacher, there was a period of time where, bless me, I was like, safety is essential. Feeling safe in your nervous system to having the most effective healing, right? To really being able to do deep spiritual work, deep sexual work. And I was like, I still don't really know what that is inside my own nervous system. Like, I will tell you that. And still, when I scan myself, I'm like, fuck no, I don't feel safe. Like my body does not feel safe. I don't feel safe, period. I don't feel safe in the universe. I don't feel safe with men. I don't feel safe with myself. Like, right. And what's beautiful is you can actually create safety. And I would like to talk about some of the tools that you can use to do that, because it's so powerful. But one of the most humbling things that I realized about trauma was that I believed very subconsciously that men are not safe and I am not safe in my deepest vulnerability, right? Sexual vulnerability, emotional vulnerability. Now, one thing I might do if I want to stay stuck in that belief system is magnetize a truly unsafe partner, right? But what I finally saw myself doing was I actually magnetized fairly safe men, right? Like, no human's 100% safe, but I had good partners with good hearts who were trying their best, right? And what I eventually saw was that when I would get very sexually open or vulnerable, I would do something like hook, accuse, like manipulate in some way that would shut them down. And then I would be like, see, you're not safe, right? And it took me a really long time to be like, I'm doing that, right? That's right. I was just like, see, the world's not safe. You're not safe. No one's safe. I can't trust you, right? And my partner would be like, right? And then I was like, me? I was like, I'm a good, kind person. I was like, well, you know what? If you really, if there's a part of you that is still in that much pain and that much trauma time, right? You can actually create the world that you believe to be true. And I've seen this so much. I'm sure you see it with your clients in workshops. Someone will go wanting to heal a trauma and they'll actually recreate the thing that they believe to be true. And that's actually the moment where I say, like, that's actually the choice point where you decide, oh, the whole world's that way. Or you decide, no, like, now I'm going to decide that there actually is safety anyways. Right? Like, that I'm going to start to find safety, not keep being attached to the story that no man's safe.
Yes.
because otherwise I'll just keep living that.
That's right. One of the ways that I like to think about it is, in those old Arthur Murray studios where they have the dance steps that they put on the floor, right? And they're like, you follow these dance steps and then that's what the partner is supposed to do. Well, what we do in relationships is we start to lay down the dance steps and we start to lay down their dance steps. But wait a second, you're supposed to step there. Wait, you're supposed to do this. This is where like cue card, reject me. Cue card, I'm going to behave in a way that's going to evoke in you the urge to reject me.
Yeah.
And so that moment where you're going, oh, I'm doing that. I'm actually behaving in a way that is creating the self-fulfilling prophecy of what I'm expecting you to do so that my worldview can be matched.
Yes.
And that's where huge responsibility for change happens, is actually, catching hold of the dance steps that we're doing and the ones that we're handing to our partners.
Yeah. And this to me is part of seeing through the delusion of ego that can happen in trauma work, right? You're so sure the world is a certain way. And then you're like, oh, like actually I was creating the world that I believe to be true, which at first can feel like, wait, but no, those people were assholes, or this did happen to me, or these people did perpetrate, right? But there's so much hope in realizing that I am that much of a creator of my reality, because it means that I can create a different reality, that no matter how much I've been certain that the world is a certain way, I can always actually wake up to a different aspect of the universe by actually coming into a deep, empowering relationship to myself. And to me, that's what the universe is calling us into, is can you find that actual power and the depth of responsibility that you then see how much you can access different parts of the world through who you become internally.
Yes. There's one piece though that I might offer as a refinement on what you just shared. Yeah. Which is that there are times, like you said, that you were doing this dance with someone that with partners that were trying really hard to be the good enough partner, right?
Totally.
But not everybody is that partner.
No.
Right. And so the part of the other challenge that happens is that sometimes we are with people that are actually really detrimental for our well-being.
100%.
And because you are someone and I am someone that tends to want to take a lot of self-responsibility for what we're creating in the world, we will actually take like too much responsibility. We'll actually make the faulty error of saying, oh, it must be something I'm doing and it must be something I'm evoking in them. Yeah. When actually sometimes it's not. It's really them and their dance steps and what they're putting out into the world. Yeah. So cultivating the wisdom to know the difference is a really key element to healing, and being able to recognize actually what is toxic and what's not good for us. And to be able to say no to those things that are not beneficial for us is, a very necessary part.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that. I think that's so incredibly important, and to really share that, because there is still so much toxicity that is happening in relating and out in the world, right? It's a really big piece of where trauma is still showing up, right? And other people have their own trauma, right? That actually can be creating so much pain and so much suffering and things like that. I'm excited to tell you about my 6-week self-pleasure training, Obliss. This is the first course I ever made, and it has been going for over 10 years now. Most of us are never taught the tools required to create deeply rooted self-love, which not only leaves us feeling disconnected from our bodies and ourselves, but what a lot of people don't know is that a foundation of self-love is crucial to building the deepest connections and experiencing the most ecstatic pleasure with others as well. My 6-week sexual masterclass for women, Obliss, trains you to have the ultimate orgasm and fall deeply in love with yourself and your body. You'll heal your sexuality, address old wounds, face things like fear, guilt, shame, and shutdown, and be able to heal and integrate them, and discover how to access the deepest, most profound self-love. So whether you're just dipping your toes into the magic of Tantra, or you are a seasoned sacred sexuality practitioner, you can use Obliss to expand your pleasure capacity and to access the most exquisite self-love. You can join Obliss today. You can get started right away at laylamartin.com/Obliss. That's Obliss, O like orgasm, and then bliss, laylamartin.com/obliss. So something that I was curious about is I know that you are kind of really sharing that on this journey, having professionals and allies is very important, which it absolutely is. I'm wondering if you can share some tools or steps that can help make some of this real for people who want to start to do more or want to really understand what this can look like. So one of the pieces that we've touched on is safety. Right. And what is a practice that can help your nervous system experience safety when that is a very foreign concept for you?
Yeah. So sometimes when we will use the word safe, like you said, it feels so foreign, and and sometimes it's also in itself a trigger word.
Yeah.
And the reality is that sometimes the world isn't safe.
Yeah.
And so we can fine tune that word into a word that actually does resonate with your nervous system, right? Maybe it's easefulness, maybe it's connection, maybe it's ground. So that's something that you get to play with, is even just kind of like refining the word. Another is to find the cues of safety.
Yeah.
Like for me, a huge cue of safety is through connection and being able to arrive into what it feels like to be able to stay in connection with myself while I come into connection with you. And it's a really fundamental skill, and it might feel, it might feel strange to practice something that seems very basic, but actually in our earliest life experiences, we often get trained to abandon self for other, right? Like I will deny or ignore myself, but if I take care of you, all will be okay. I'll sustain relationship and connection. But guess what gets lost? Authenticity. And so we need to find this balance between, actually, if I do that long enough, if I leave myself for the sake of connection, I've entered into faux safety. I've entered into this idea of safety. But if I'm not residing in here, I can't actually find the cues from my body that let me know whether or not I actually do feel safe. So I think boundaries are such a key element to safety. And it doesn't mean like hard, fast wall kind of boundaries, but that fine tuning of how does your body say yes and how does your body say no? I'll share a moment for me that happened, that kind of pivotal moment in my own healing journey. So I was studying somatic psychology. I was 23 at this point. I had recently moved here. I was dating somebody that really was not a yes, but I made it a yes. I've become very good at making no's a yes. And as one of my clients once told me, she got very good at painting the red flags white, and so we can find ways that we, override that no. And for this entire relationship, the entire 3 months of the relationship, those loves at 23, right? But those entire 3 months, I had a stomach ache. It was like an undigestible pit that had landed here. And rather than hearing that as my body saying no, what I did was I made the symptom wrong. I was like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. Let me fix this thing in me that's saying no. And it wasn't until I actually got curious about this and started to listen to it and started to honor it that I was like, wait a second. That's my body saying this doesn't feel good to me. That's my no. And as soon as I honored that, everything softened. I left the relationship and I started to veer towards that which was more of a yes. So our bodies have such incredible wisdom if we are willing to develop that connection. And I believe that in terms of the very practical tools of turning towards safety, one of those is who does provide enough of those cues that let you know that it's safe to go inward, right? I don't have to take care of you, so I can really feel like it's okay for me to take care of me in your presence. It can be helpful to literally look around your space and find the cues, like a flower, like a scent, right? That just help us reorient through our senses to what safe can feel like here and now. You can work with your own self-touch, right? Just kind of loving yourself with that, holding yourself with that, rocking yourself as a way to invite yourself back in And sometimes that sometimes that greeting of yourself, like you said, like it felt terrifying to go toward your body. I remember one time where turning towards my body felt so scary. And a practitioner said to me, can you find one area in your body that you are willing to connect to right now? Tip of your nose, your toes, your hair, your ear, right? Like you can find something that's the extremity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can relate to my hands.
Yeah.
It feels safe enough to feel my hands, because to feel this feels overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I found with safety was my mind always wanted to go to, but like the world isn't safe, or this can be unsafe, or whatever. Right. And so the real coming home to self was when it is actually safe, right? Like when I'm in my bedroom, or I'm snuggled up under a blanket, or I'm like cuddling a kitten, or, somewhere beautiful, like a sunny beach. Can my nervous system actually take in the safety of that moment, rather than having my nervous system always on high alert, right? So not letting my mind go to all of the things that could be unsafe about the world, because the reality is we don't live in a safe world all the time. But can I be in moments of safety when the moment is safe, right? So like almost like coaxing and inviting my nervous system into that present reality. And that became like a skill. I never thought of safety as a skill before. And I trained myself into it. I think something really powerful, one of my Vita teachers, Marina, says is she's like, I am a Black woman, right? And the world isn't safe for me in so many ways. And yet I found that the most radical, empowering thing I could do was to find my safety when I was safe, to let my nervous system have, as you say, that rest, that peace, that ease, to claim that and own that for myself in a world that has made me feel so unsafe so often. To let myself have that back, to claim that for myself, has been so radical. Right. And I felt that too as a sexual abuse survivor, right? That like it felt at first so empowering to just be like hyper vigilant and like, no, the world is unsafe and all these things happen. Finally, I was like, oh, one of the most compassionate, empowering things I can do for my nervous system is to let my nervous system experience real safety again in moments where I actually am. Right. And what that does is then it actually lets my nervous system, as you're kind of talking about, notice when I am genuinely unsafe, right? Instead of just being on like unsafety high alert all the time. It's like, no, I can actually start to have this sort of range. This is not the sexiest way to segue into drinking sex magic, but I love when you came and I was like, are you cool drinking some mood products? You're like, I already told my husband I'd be drinking aphrodisiacs. So let's drink some aphrodisiacs.
That sounds lovely. Thank you. Let me check in with my body. Is it a yes? Is it a no?
Yeah, no, for sure. We want this to be consensual. We don't want unconsensual aphrodisiac consumption happening in any podcast ever.
We're good. And humor is such a beautiful piece. Actually, it's such a perfect segue, because I think that sometimes we think that trauma healing is only heavy and it's only serious and it's only painful. And actually humor needs to be an essential part of it. And so can joy be an essential part of healing. So yes, let's have an aphrodisiac.
People are always like, this might be a little much, but I'm going to say it anyway. People are like, wow, you're so good at laughing at your pain. I was like, if I didn't learn to laugh at my pain, I would have killed myself. So like, it's actually like this like way of finding, like, even in the darkest corners of my experience, like, can I be laughing with the universe? And honestly, the number of times that has saved my ass of just being like, all right, here we are. All is lost. We're in the darkest pits of hell. And like, can I find like, not like a fake humor, but like the genuine, like comedic joke about this moment? And like, I often can.
Yeah. I bet you can. I have a sense that you can.
Well, like, you have like the darkest stand-up comedy. I'm like, I earned it.
Well earned, well deserved. Yeah. And there's a way in which, kind of catching that is also empowering, right? It's like, we're not going to strip you of your ability to perceptually be able to turn something and to look at something in a new way. One of the things that gets lost in trauma, I'll choose my potion in a moment. But I think one of the things that gets lost is this perceptual rigidity. We get caught in the perceptual rigidity. We lose perceptual flexibility.
Totally.
So humor is good for that.
Absolutely.
All right, what you got there?
Okay, so this is sex magic. So this makes you feel kind of like glittery. It enhances blood flow. It gives you a kind of like rushy feeling. There's no caffeine in it. You can sleep on it, but this is kind of the best for, it has like a L-dopamine enhancer. So it's like good for desire. And you can layer this with other kind of experiences. So this is euphoria. This one's not good for now because it's evening and it's got like a green tea amount of caffeine in it. This is play. The rest of these can be taken at night. So this is like cacao flavonoids, sacred lotus. It's got kanna. So it's a heart opener. That's really like, it's meant to shift you from like head states to playful embodied states. And then this is sensuality. So this really like relaxes you, opens you. So it's got like blue vervain, L-theanine, Catuaba bark, Damiana. So it's very dreamy, ashwagandha. So this is really pretty with the sex magic as well. So yeah, you can kind of pick your flavor.
I'm going with play.
Yeah.
No, okay. I don't have my glasses and I'm getting old. The only thing I need to know is I have a little allergy to tyrosine or tyramine. Yeah, I know. Double check.
Like that would just be an ingredient in here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not added.
Yeah.
No.
It's like an amino acid.
Does has saffron and GABA in it though.
I'll take. Oh, I like GABA.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, you can have 2 or 3 of those.
Okay,
So there's the kind of dose. We'll do sex magic.
Apparently, no one else chose play. I'm opening it for the first time.
Actually, I just gave.
They're all fresh packages.
Yeah. Jaya and Ian had just sex magic. Or Ian and me had sex magic. Jaya's couldn't have any of them. But yeah, we're going to layer. We're ready for the layering.
That sounds lovely. Thank you.
I'm going to do.
Can I stir? Is that
sensuality? Yes, you can stir. Okay. Sometimes with the sparkling water, it gets a bit foamy.
Oh, so it smells so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really happy with the taste. It's a happy, like we did a long formulation with this like all female team of scientists. Because to get like this amount of herbs and it's got like nothing fake, nothing whatever in it. And the sweetener is just monk fruit. To taste this good, I was like.
I know I heard you share in a previous podcast how you haven't eaten sugar in 16 years. I'm impressed. It's impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Having said that, I had like a couple of bites of an acai bowl today and I was like, oh, I think this is sugar.
Right. But no kidding. I mean, when you haven't had sugar for a long time and then all of a sudden you're tasting it, it's like, oh, this feels terrible in my body. Right.
Yeah. It doesn't actually taste good anymore.
Yeah. But there's, I like monk fruit and there's so many other ways to have sweetness, aren't there?
I didn't know that xylitol kills the bacteria that give you cavities. So the bacteria that give you cavities that live right on your teeth,
right?
They like eating sugar. And then once they eat sugar, it like gets them all wild and then they start chewing into your enamel, which is what gives you a cavity. So xylitol, they preferentially eat it over like glucose, but the xylitol kills them.
Right on. There you go.
Yeah. Cause like for a while I was like, why do all these like organic toothpaste products have xylitol? And then I was like, what? That's weird. Like, whatever. And I'm like the type of person who used to look up every ingredient in like environmental working group where you can like search how toxic
I really
it
trust
is.
you.
Yeah, totally. No, I was like nuts. And so like I would look every single ingredient up. And so I was like avoiding xylitol. And then I was like, oh no, I can like,
this is delicious. It's really delicious.
Yay.
Yeah.
Those herbs all stirred.
It tastes chocolatey, but I don't know if there's chocolatey in it. It just has a chocolatey flavor.
Did you take your play?
Yeah.
Okay, the play has cacao in it.
That's my
You might be tasting it. Yeah.
It's very good.
All right. So let's see. I'm going to take my sensuality and then we probably have, 1 or 2 more questions. So good so far.
Yeah.
Okay. I know these, we just made these cool new colored capsules. This one is spirulina. That's turmeric and that's beet.
Yeah.
So it's actually all natural.
Well done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to lose the spoon. All right, let's put the spoon on the phone. Put the little pieces away. Yay. All right, this will get us through the last 10 minutes.
Have you been doing a lot of these just today?
No, this is only the second one.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, I essentially did 2 yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Babak just did a BDSM and Tantra 7-day retreat in Mexico.
Wow.
So coming from that, which actually doing like that level of BDSM with a very like deep trauma angle, where it was like you actually can like super play out like whatever you're afraid of, your deepest shadows, the stuff that makes you feel unworthy, like all of that with so much eros was like so deep and so powerful. And also I was like, I could probably sleep for like a month and I'm just going to make podcasts.
I bet. That sounds like a lot of output.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. My couple last round fire questions for you are, how does sexual trauma show up in people's sex lives? And what do you think is one of the most effective ways to heal sexual trauma? I know, again, like when we talk about trauma, it's this huge, it's like a life journey, right? So I don't want to oversimplify it, and yet just to have your very deep and insightful perspective on what have you seen is very effective in being able to heal it.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that it can show up in our sex life. I'll name kind of 3 core patterns. One is that I engage in sexuality, but I'm not listening to my authentic consent in that process. And so I'm actually overriding my yes or my no and making it a yes, or I'm engaging in something even though I don't really want to. And it doesn't have to even, like, it can be at the most subtle levels of like I'm freezing, or I'm no longer feeling, or I'm actually numb, or I'm using alcohol and drugs to get through this. And that, you know, or I'll just move past that and I'll speed up so that I don't have to actually feel through the process. So that would be kind of one possibility is, you know, this engagement. And I think that possibility has a range, it has a continuum. And sometimes it can lead into what we would think of as kind of like a hypersexuality of just being like so overtly sexual as, but in a way that actually has no intimacy. Right? Like, I'm amazed at how many times we can actually be sexual with someone before we've had a conversation about our lives, our hearts, our fears, our desires, but we're willing to show our bodies or go into the most deepest places physically without actually having any emotional intimacy. And I'm not here to judge or to make it wrong. It's just something to watch for, like, is trauma playing into that pattern or that picture? And then the other, of course, would be the utter avoidance, like to actually pull back into the opposite direction and to feel so phobic and afraid of your body, feel so phobic and afraid of being in deep connection with another, that you cultivate a life that has is disconnected from sexuality altogether, or disconnected from yourself. Yeah.
And then what do you see? And then what do you see is the most kind of effective way or ways that people can actually start to heal sexual trauma?
Yeah. First of all, I think you have to talk about it. Like, you have to start to open up that conversation with yourself, right? So we do need the narrative component, and whether that's admitting it to yourself, whether that's going to therapy and speaking about it in the safety of that, whether it's finally, you know, choosing that really close friend that you know can handle it and saying, this happened and it happened to me, and I'm really, you know, scared to talk about it, but it's time. And what's so profound about where we are in our world right now is that the world is ready for these conversations. I mean, you know, post Me Too and people coming forth. And I think that for so long, women coming forth, I mean, let's roll it all the way back to Freud for a moment and just say that the women that were coming forth at that time, initially what Freud discovered was trauma. And then what he did was he pathologized it. And then he, you know, basically called it hysteria. And
yeah, let's talk about that. I love this story actually. That
what we think of as like the Oedipus complex or women having hysteria was actually when Freud was a young psychotherapist in London, and he was working with upper class women, and they were basically reporting, right? They're being treated for hysteria, which essentially they were traumatized, and they were saying, I was sexually abused mostly by my father is what they were saying.
Right.
And so he actually published a report saying women are having these counterproductive behaviors because they've been sexually abused. And there was an uproar, and basically they were like, you were saying that the upper society of Britain is full of pedophile men. Like, how dare you? So he was kind of shamed. He withdrew the paper. And then he came out with the Oedipal theory, which is, oh, they must be fantasizing about their parent, right? And so
Penis envy.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that was actually like, people think this whole theory is like scientific and has a lot of proof, but actually it was in some ways this cover up and a tremendous loss for society, because it was actually almost 100 years later that it took for a full realization of how damaging sexual abuse is, how rampant and widespread it is, and for society to really actually start doing trauma healing. And we're just at the tiny little tip of what it is to actually institute widespread trauma healing practices and to heal our pain as society, which I believe is underneath almost every destructive thing that you see happening in the world today. And instead of bemoaning the state of humanity, it's like, what are we doing to actually heal the pain? But it's really important for people to understand this. What was happening even back then at the roots of psychotherapy was this tremendous disempowerment of women having the courage to actually talk about their trauma and what happened to them. And so it's been so long that so many of us have felt so unsafe. So it still takes so much courage even today to start talking about it.
Exactly. I'm so glad that we paused on that and really unfolded that story. It's a tragedy, quite honestly. And it's, it speaks about social construction and the ways in which, for so long, it impacted women to feel afraid to come out and to speak out about their abuse because they were afraid that they would be told that they are crazy. And that is essentially what that story was, is that women, instead of being believed, were being told that they were crazy. And so this is the time where not only individually, but collectively, we are ready to heal.
Yeah.
And that it is finally safe to come out and to share these stories and to speak about what you went through and to speak about what I went through and to be able to know that you're not alone with it, which is so huge because it takes that layer of shame and suppression out of the picture. And then we can finally start to heal. We can heal for ourselves and we can heal for, I think for generations and for the generations that come after us.
Yeah.
Yeah. But your question really is very specific about how do we heal? How do we really support this process? And so, I started with one, which is that we need to be able to talk about it. We need to be able to talk about it freely without that shame. And then we need to go towards the body.
Yeah.
And we need to willingly, and there's lots of ways to do this safely in somatic psychology and body-centered psychotherapy. We call this process titration, which means that you go toward the tolerable amount of discomfort or distress or shame or pain, loss, fear. Then you come back out to the safety. Yeah. And so we need that ground of safety and connection to then be able to go toward the memory of the time when it wasn't safe. And then the last piece that somatics gives us is that if in the time of the trauma, what happened was that we didn't get to use our voice, or we didn't get to say no, or we didn't get to push through our arms, or we didn't get to leave that room. I didn't get to get up and get out of that desk and run out of that room, which is what every cell in my body wanted to do. Right. And so if we go back and we reclaim and we listen to what wanted to happen in the body, we've often heard this term that, the body keeps the score. This is Bessel van der Kolk's book, right? The body bears the burden of trauma. But what we don't hear is that the body also carries the instinct of what wanted to happen, and that the body carries that instinct and it allows us to heal. So when we listen to what wanted to happen and we give space for that here and now, and we know that now is different from then, that's how we heal.
Yes. And I think the message I most want to leave people with, and then I'd love to hear the message you want to leave people with, is that from my perspective, we have lived through traumatized society for at least a few thousand years, if not longer, right? We can say the word patriarchy, we can say the word racist, we can say violent, right? But at the heart, to me now, when I really look at it, I was like, we just been traumatizing ourselves and each other, like in various systems, various behaviors. And whether we've been through acute trauma or not, all of us got raised in a society where we were trained to actually behave in a very traumatized way towards ourselves, to dissociate from ourselves, to be violent towards ourselves, to be aggressive and violent towards others, to shame ourselves, to numb ourselves, right? And so much of society, when I look around the way that people are behaving, it's that we don't know how to be with our pain. And we have been trained to avoid our pain at all costs. Mm-hmm. And the effects of that are a violent, traumatized, addicted society, right? Like all of these are trauma behaviors, mm-hmm. right? And we think like, oh, people are broken. It's like, no, they're traumatized. Mm-hmm. And so these systems that we're talking about, right? Like whether it's somatics, whether it's somatic experiencing, I find internal family systems has helped me a lot in healing my trauma. Breathwork has helped me in healing my trauma. States of ecstasy in mystical communion have helped me heal from my trauma. Meditation has helped me heal from my trauma. Just a daily practice of self-love, mm-hmm. sensual dancing, right? Having friends that I love mm-hmm. and learning to find safety and joy and beauty and connection, right? Mm-hmm. Like all of this has helped me. So it's been reading books, it's been working with professionals, it's been doing retreats and workshops, has helped me start to speak a language of trauma, mm-hmm. to understand tools and practices, and more than anything else, to start to rewire myself to be anti-trauma. I don't even know if there's a word for it, right? Mm-hmm. There should be, mm-hmm. In the way that I relate to myself. Mm-hmm. Which is to be a secure, loving, centered base for every part of myself, to actively choose love, to come home to myself if I'm in pain or distress, and to rewire my nervous system to be an expression of the beauty and magic of the world rather than the worst pain. To be able to be with my pain in a loving and beautiful way, and also to be able to digest pain. We forget this sometimes, but in the tantric tradition, right, there's this amazing teaching around the vayus, and samana vayu is this quality of digestion that actually helps us digest our experiences. And many of us are energetically depleted. And in these mystical traditions, there's actually these teachings of how you build your energy body so that you can digest your past, your experiences, the shitty things that happen to you, and come back to the present as an actual energetic ability that we have within our system. So all of this, it's like it's fundamentally changed my orientation so that I live. It's like, I keep on calling it anti-trauma, but I wish there was like a positive way for it, like an anti-trauma relationship to myself. And that is a lifetime's work, but it's so beautiful. And I think what's so cool about that is all of us who decide to do it, we get to be the ones where it's like everything that came before me, I have the privilege to be the one where it stops with me.
That's right.
And then a whole new world gets birthed with me in every person that I touch, and whether I have children or not. And there's so much beauty in that. So I like to remind us, and I like to remind the people I work with, that as much as this work can hurt sometimes, it's also a tremendous privilege to be able to do it, because how many of our mothers or grandmothers or great grandmothers didn't let themselves cry or even know that these tools were available. So in all of this, it's like, these are huge wisdom traditions, like trauma healing. And, you have 8 books, right? And it's just like a chunk of the wisdom body this is. I like to think of trauma healing as an actual wisdom tradition that you can apprentice yourself to. and you can learn this vast way of being with yourself that fundamentally changes everything.
Yes. I think the anti-trauma is the self, and that what we're reclaiming, and that's that capital S self, that is that whole self, that is the self that holds within it all of your potential and all that that seed is meant to grow into, right? Like, and I'm just watching you. It's so beautiful to just spend this time sitting together and to just really feel that the depth of wisdom that you've cultivated within you, and that it's that you've got such clarity, and it's really beautiful to bear witness to who you are.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. I
Yeah.
felt in getting to look into your eyes, just being bathed in the transmission of compassion and beauty, and just like, it's like looking into a mirror where it's hard to see anything other than compassion and beauty. And I can only imagine what it's taken to cultivate that as the emanation of yourself in this lifetime. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have one more story, and it feels like a little worthy wraparound because it ties into something that you just said.
Yeah.
And it's you speaking about the generations, and in a sense, the collective trauma that we've all experienced on the planet, but also I think generationally and ancestrally, we get passed on the incomplete business, not only of our own history, but also that of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. Like our legacy, their legacy lives in our cells. And when I have spent some time really looking at my own family legacy, it's a short story, but it's a worthy one. I came across, it was about just a year ago, so relatively recently in my own healing journey, I came across the family tree where I was looking back at my mother's mother, my grandmother, and then her mother, my great-grandmother, who was living in Kyiv, in at the time Russia was, now Ukraine, and this was at the time when the convoy of tanks is heading into Kyiv, and something really deep started rumbling in my system, where I was like, I need to look at my family tree. This was my motherland. I need to look at my family tree. And I go and I pull out my family tree, and I see that right at the time when the Jews were being taken out of their homeland and being placed in pogroms, and my grandmother leaves her homeland, and she's pregnant. It's my great-grandmother. Probably my great-grandmother is pregnant with her first child, and she was 12.
Wow.
And at that moment, I went, well, of course that happened for me at 12, right? There was this way in which, and her husband, and I don't know the story because I don't know the story, but her husband, my great-great-grandfather, great-grandfather, just 3 generations up, was 27. Right. So then you have to think, what was that? What was going on at in the planet, in the family, in the system, and to hold that they're both part of me. The 12-year-old who gets placed in marriage to the 27-year-old and she's a child. I mean, I have a daughter. I was once 12. I was a child. So as you said, we get to be the ones that catch it and change it and transmute it so that we are not going to pass this trauma on any further.
Yeah.
And that's power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Can you please share with everyone how they can access your work, drink of the body of this wisdom transmission of trauma that you have so generously shared with the world?
Yeah. Absolutely. First, I want to say that this is delicious and it feels so good in my body. So that's a worthy pause. How you can find me. You can find me at drarielleschwartz.com, at resilienceinformedtherapy.com, which is more the hub of my work and the work of people that work with me. I have programs, I have retreats, I have books. I have a YouTube channel at Dr. Arielle Schwartz. I'm on Insta at Arielle Schwartz Boulder. I'm on YouTube at Dr. Arielle Schwartz, and on Facebook at Dr. Arielle Schwartz.
Yeah.
Lots of ways to stay in touch.
Study the wisdom tradition of trauma healing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.